Let's talk about relapse. The traditional definition of relapse is a recurrence of symptoms of a disease after a period of improvement and the act or an instance of worsening, backsliding, or subsiding. Now, before I give you my definition of relapse, here's why I disagree with the traditional definition. Number one, I don't believe in disease. I think that our bodies tell us when something is wrong and when we need to pay attention. And number two, I think the framing for both of these is very shame based and almost negative. Not almost, very negative. They're implying that a relapse means you're going backwards, right? Backsliding or worsening. And they're basically saying that relapse is a product of a disease. So if you're an addict, that means that you have a disease. My relationship with relapse is vastly different. So here's my definition of relapse: the act of coping with pain in ways that no longer serve me. Now, why is this important? Why is this an important distinction? It frames my behavior, my relapse, as a positive, which it is, for two reasons, very important reasons. Number one is that I'm coping with pain. A lot of times, the reason that we relapse is because we are either going to groups or we're starting that process of recovery or of healing, and a lot of pain comes up. Relapse, in a way, is our way of coping when that pain comes back up. And number two is in ways that no longer serve me. So that implies that my behavior, this relapse, the behaviors of my relapse did serve me at one point. And so how is that, right? How is that possible? How is relapse a positive? And I want to be clear. I'm not saying exactly like, this is awesome. This is not a goal, right? Relapse is not a goal. I'm just making this video because I think it has a very negative connotation and a lot of people miss the point, right? Anytime that we decide to heal or to enter recovery, shit probably will get a lot harder before it gets easier, right? A lot harder probably means relapse. And relapse doesn't have to be drugs or crazy shit, right? It can be binge watching TV or binge eating. Like relapse can look like so many different things. So the moment where this really clicked for me was after my first psilocybin mushroom session. After I did that, man, so much shit came up for me. Like so much pain resurfaced. And I didn't, I had some tools at the time for how to process that and how to deal with it, but not many. And so what did I do, right? I relapsed on my addictions and on my behaviors that no longer serve me, which are sex addiction and my addiction to drugs and my addiction to media. But when I relapsed with my sex addiction, I was ashamed for a really long time. And I didn't talk to anybody about it. Why? Because, again, I had this old mentality that I had failed and that my relapse meant I wasn't actually doing the work and I wasn't actually healing. I was just a fraud. And so then I brought it to my therapist and I told him, I feel like I'm not actually doing the work. I feel like I let myself down. And his response, the way that he approached this and also what he said, is now what I've adopted for myself. So what he said to me was, the fact that you relapsed is an indicator that the work you're doing is working, right? Because if there wasn't any pain, if you weren't bringing up any pain, any old wounds, any old trauma, there wouldn't be a need for you to fall back on old patterns. In a way, it's like, how did I deal with pain my whole life? Drugs, video games and TV, media, and sex. Those have been my three biggest distractions and my three biggest coping mechanisms. And the way that he approached it, right? Those were the words that he said. The way that he approached it was with compassion. He said, "I understand, right? I've done that before. I've told myself I'm not going to do something and then done it after I promised that to myself. What I learned was that the goal is not to avoid relapse. The goal is to learn to be compassionate when we do, and that's just what's worked for me. If I relapse, I already feel bad. Why am I going to add this shame and this guilt on top of that? It's already enough. Wouldn't it help me more to add a fucking positive voice that is actually understanding of what's going on, so that the relapse itself doesn't then become a traumatic event in and of itself? And one final thing is that, sometimes pain resurfaces in very subtle ways. We might not have just finished doing a huge psilocybin ceremony, right? But maybe somebody said something to us at work and it triggered something that we didn't even become conscious of. And so we went home that night and we engaged in our addiction. If I approach that judgmentally and shameful and just with guilt, I might miss the lesson that is there. But if I approach it with compassion and understanding, then I'm naturally gonna want to pause and be like, oh shit, I'm doing this thing that I didn't want to do again. That means there's something I need to investigate. It's what Gabor Mate calls compassionate inquiry. And again, this is just what's worked for me. Thank you for allowing me to share a part of my story with you. I hope that it's helped or touched you in some way. If there's anything in this area that you're curious about or that you're struggling with, leave a comment below. I might have some experience with it, and who knows, maybe I can make a video about that next. All right, thank you for watching.